So hello everybody, a warm welcome to you. I'm here with Will Falconer and it's a delight and a privilege to have you. I'm very excited for this conversation, my friend.
Yeah, glad to be here. Very good to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
So what's exciting me about this conversation, as an animal lover myself, I am very interested to know about animals during this COVID-19 time, and are they likely to spread COVID-19 or be affected by it or not? Maybe we can get the ball rolling with that question.
Yeah, it's a question on a lot of my readers' lips and minds. So there's some interesting data out there, and I've been tracking it pretty closely. The bottom line is we've had a handful of animals, domestic animals, and even some zoo animals who've been tested and found positive. They've had some respiratory symptoms and they've tested positive for COVID-19. Almost without exception, they all got it from a human. So they're calling it a reverse zoonosis. Really? Zoonosis just means those diseases that come from animals to man. And this is just the reverse. So the person's got some respiratory symptoms, they get tested, they're COVID positive, and the animal may come up with it. But it's been a small handful, John. It's not many by any means.
Interesting. So coming more from the humans to the animals, the other way around.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, well, that's reassuring to know. And I know a lot of our listeners intuitively, would have felt something of that nature. But it's great to hear it from you, this is your expertise. So very reassuring to know. And I'm seeing some people come onto the live. Hey, Nancy, saying hello to Doctor, saying hello to you. So
welcome.
Waving back. So welcome to you. Thank you for being with us. Next question I have is the top 3 things to keep our animals safe and healthy right now during these times. So what are the top 3 practical things that we can do?
There's some really practical things, and they revolve around prevention, but done in a natural way. So stepping outside of the conventional medical paradigm, which is actually damaging them. One revolves around what we put in the food dish every day. They've got to eat, and like us, they are what they eat. And so I always look at the wolf as a model for the dog. They're genetically almost identical. Okay. And I look at somebody like the bobcat for the cat in the family and, assume that there's probably genetic overlap there as well. We haven't worked that out, but many times the common food poured into the bowl is this clink, clink, dunk, dunk, dunk kibble. It's a dried chunk, right?
Yeah, sure.
And a colleague of mine calls them food-like particles. They're very, very different than anything that a wolf would ever encounter in the wild, right?
Oh, absolutely. Completely different. So we're just getting some hellos, just acknowledged from Pensacola. Wonderful to see you online, from Joy, saying that to you. So thanks for your interactions, guys. And we love having you interact with us. So thank you for that. And these particles, I've intuitively sensed that when I've given them to my animals. I'm guilty of having done that. So that's why I'm here to learn as a student with you. I just know that's not right, but this is where I'm here to learn, and I trust people tuning into this to learn what do we do, which is of course where you're going with this question. So yeah, please carry on.
Yeah. So just a couple of real simple problems with kibble. It starts with toxic ingredients quite often. There are these things called byproducts. And then it's super processed, lots of heat and pressure. So whatever's there is killed. There's no life left. And of course, a wolf with that genetic overlap to the dog is used to eating and genetically expecting one thing, which is prey. Prey is always fresh and it's raw and it's alive up until the moment it's eaten, right?
Yeah.
So a very different thing. Well, here's what's really cool. In Purdue, where there's a veterinary school, they did a study in 2005, and they had these dogs who were used to eating kibble, and they said, let's take a group of them, and just 3 days a week, we're going to add some fresh, raw, green leafy vegetables, really finely chopped up, because these guys aren't chewing, right? They're carnivores. They swallow their food. But let's add maybe a portion, like 25%, take away the kibble part and put in that 25% as fresh, raw, green leafy vegetables. They measured them for a period of time, and they found a 90% drop in these dogs' cancer risk. I'm not sure how they measured that, but it was a 90% change compared to the guys who were staying on kibble all the time. So one thing we can do right off the bat, super, super simple, is crack a raw egg right on that kibble. Even better than green leafies, because that's more akin to what a wolf would eat, right? Would they eat a nest of eggs if they found it? Oh, absolutely. So you find these eggs that are the healthiest you can find, that they've got the yolks that stand up and they're bright orange and, good for you. They're good for your dog as well. They're good for your cat as well. But it could be a chunk of raw meat or even a raw chicken wing. And you've just made a huge upgrade in that kibble that you're feeding. So
got it.
Interestingly, in my practice, the ones who took it to the end extreme and went all raw and all balanced, there's balanced raw diets and there's unbalanced raw diets, but they did it right. Those patients of mine would leave my practice, John. They didn't need my homeopathic prescribing anymore. They were so healthy and so shiny. Their eyes lost their matter. Their skin glowed. They were like magnets in the dog park. People would come up and say, "Oh, how did you get this dog so healthy?"
They leave your practice. So, I got to speak to that for a moment. I absolutely have to. I find that noble that you're giving away tips and secrets that help people leave your practice. I mean, that's not typically how the medical system works, but I've always wondered about that, because the nature of the model is to keep people dependent on them. So I personally very much appreciate you sharing tips that put you out of business.
It's my happiest moment when somebody graduates from needing me. It's like, wow, it turns the business model upside down, but there's so many broken animals out there that I could practice and do nothing else if I wanted to forever. And I've actually turned to teaching because I want more people to know this stuff. And I've slowed my practice way down and increased my teaching because we got to stop damaging these animals in the name of prevention and in good, with a mindset of we're trying to help.
Yeah, got it. Well, and so just to recap, that first tip is to crack a raw egg over or add a little bit of raw food of some sort to that dried food if you must work with that. And for those just tuning in, this is part of the lead up to the World Health Sovereignty Summit main compilation. So just thank you for everyone tuning in. And if you haven't yet registered for that, head over to reclaimyourlives.com where you can register and experience that main event. And we're here with Will talking about practical steps to help our animals be healthier. And the first one so far is adding a raw egg or raw meat to some dry food to support them, because they're naturally akin in the nature to having freshness and rawness. So please, I think we're up to the next one now, perhaps, Will, or is there anything more on that point before we move to the
just a couple more interesting points. The research shows now that cancer is the killer of 1 in 2 dogs. That's how they're going to leave the world.
Jeez.
And yet, when they measure it, they found that 10% of the cancer cases are due to genetic causes. 90% are the result of lifestyle and environmental influences. If you take that 90% lifestyle and environmental influences, those are things like stress, obesity, infection, leading a sedentary lifestyle, familiar stuff to us, and toxins and pollution, things in the world that are poisonous. But if we look at that 90%, diet is the largest chunk of that. So we've got that in our hands, right? We can control what our innocents get in their food dish every day. And it's estimated that 30 to 40% of all cancers can be prevented simply by implementing dietary changes. So that's a huge amount of betterment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know talking to you prior to this interview, I was sharing with you my intuitive, and you're validating it as a professional perspective. It's just when I walk into a typical pet food store, it just stinks of chemicals, and it just feels wrong to me intuitively. Now, I don't have the knowledge you have, so I'm delighted to hear it from the intellectual and from the research-based perspective, but I've always felt that. And you're speaking to it, and I'm so grateful, and it makes so much sense to me. I know this in my being, but the science, the research, it helps us assimilate that from another perspective. So I'm grateful to be hearing this from you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. One last point on food. There's a man named Thomas Sandberg in Norway, and he's studying longevity of dogs, and I think maybe cats as well. He's got over 6,000 raw-fed dogs and cats from, I think, several decades now.
Cool.
And these animals are all way beyond the norm. We've come to believe that animals should be able to live. So again, it can do a huge amount of good.
Love that. Well, I know you've talked about, I've heard you talk about putting off vaccines. Yeah. But what happens if, we're coming in to our vet and they say it's due, has to be done? How do we navigate those waters if we find ourselves in that situation?
Vaccinating is actually the second, if not the first thing that we need to stop doing wrongly. And in this, at least in the West, where I just left, the US and Canada, it's becoming common to get prompted to vaccinate annually. About 60% of my colleagues will bother their animal owners to vaccinate every single year. And vaccines are the #1 predictor of chronic disease in pets, John. There's just no question about it. I can see the history as I take their histories. And what it does is it produces what I call a state of immune confusion. So we're trying to do something to help the immune system. Yeah, in effect, what we're doing is we're setting that immune system that's been finely tuned over millennia into a huge state of confusion. So how is it confused? One is about 30 days after a vaccine event. If you're looking closely for this, you'll see dogs breaking out with allergies. Turns out allergies in dogs is itchy skin and or itchy ears and painful ears. Whereas people get allergies in their sinuses and respiratory systems, dogs get it in their skin and their ears. That's the #1 reason. This is interesting data from 15 years now. It's the #1 reason that dogs see veterinarians.
Right. Wow.
Allergies. So we've brought that on with this immune confusion. I call it confusion because somebody who's allergic is overreacting wildly to normal things, right? A bite of a flea is a normal thing in a dog's life. Somebody who's allergic to fleas, oh my God, they're tearing their hair out. They're biting, they're getting moist, oozy spots on their skin, all sorts of problems.
I feel some emotion as you're sharing this because I'm here in Bali and we see a lot of animals walking around the streets with tumors and things hanging off them, and it just doesn't. And I think, what the heck's happened here? And I know there's a lot of cheap vaccinations and things happening and stuff like that, but or poor food quality. So, it's stirring to know that there's simple measures that we can do to provide a better love and life for our dear animals. So absolutely imperative.
So if you're faced with a veterinarian saying, but your animal is due, those are the key words, right? You get an email or you get a postcard in the old days. I think it's probably all email now saying you're due for more shots. And they'll list the 7 or 8 things that you're supposedly due for. What you have to do is become smarter than your vet at this point and start researching this more deeply because A, you don't want to get a chronic disease out of an unnecessary vaccine. And B, why is it unnecessary? Well, if you tune into the immunologists who don't sell vaccines but study them, you will learn that there's this thing called duration of immunity, DOI. Duration of immunity just means how long does that immunity last in someone who was vaccinated yesterday? It's not done in a year. It doesn't drop off like an empty gas tank in a year. That's for sure. We know that. We've known that for decades. It doesn't drop off in 3 years. The immunologists who've studied it, John, know that we're looking at probably 5 to 7 years, if not life, for the virus vaccines. And these are the common things that we vaccinate against. We've got distemper and parvo. I'm sure you've heard of those for your dogs. They're the ones that can kill young dogs, and distemper, any age dogs. So how long does that immunity last if you did vaccinate? It lasts a long, long time, if not for life. So that's number one. You have to be aware of that, and you have to read into, why am I being prompted to get another round of vaccines when I had them earlier? And why doesn't my doctor tell me I have to come in every year for a smallpox shot? Ever think of that?
I'm getting some comments here. Become smarter than your vet. Love that. Thank you. And then we've got another one here. No more vaccines, only raw diet. No more heartworm poison. Thank you, guys. Love your interactions. And would I dare say, if you know your vet says it's due, find a holistic vet instead, perhaps? Is that another option?
Yeah, definitely. And I tell people in my blog, there's times to fire your vet. And one of those times is if your vet says annual vaccines are the way we do it here at our practice. You say, so long, you're fired, and tell them why. Tell them there's no science behind that at all. That's the thing people have to realize. There's zero science behind vaccinating annually, John. So it's time to leave and find a holistic vet. Definitely.
And this is what I love about your message and the work you're doing is it gives us pet owners confidence, because we don't know what we don't know. And you have these people in authority, just like a medical doctor, telling you it's due and this is how it has to be. And they're speaking in absolutes. And then you're like, well, I don't know. Right. So, okay. Right. But, your message, your voice helps so many of us have that cognitive and that research to stand up and feel certain in our decision making. And that is absolutely vital, whether it's in regular for ourselves or our animals. Absolutely golden. What can we do practically to boost the immunity systems of our beloved pets? Do you have some suggestions for us there on that one?
Yeah, aside from getting out of their way, not confusing the immune system with more vaccines than they need, which is few to none, actually. There are some things you can do. And one of them, of course, is diet. As we talk about improving the diet, we talk about improving the whole system, right? It's not just, a better coat or shinier eyes. The immune system feeds off what we feed the animals. So we can nourish that immune system with really good diet. And B, there's been some research for 60 years now, a good 60 years, on these things called transfer factors, which are these little tiny molecules that you find in things like colostrum, the first milk of a newborn mom to her newborn. You find them in egg yolk. And what these transfer factor molecules do is they convey immune competency, let's say, or immune intelligence. They tell the youngster, hey, here's how you look out at the world and all these germs that you've just dropped into. I love the image. I used to be a large animal vet when I first came into practice years ago, 40 years ago now. And I worked with cows. So these animals who are in the womb are in a sterile environment. And when they're born, where does that calf land? Boom, in the straw. Or if he's less likely or less lucky, he might end up in the gutter, where the manure accumulates. Right. So immediately their immune system is going, holy cats, I went from sterility to a germ-filled world. What do I do now? So that's why mothers have their first milk full of antibodies and full of these things called transfer factors. And they're valuable. Anyone who's raising animals knows that if they don't get that colostrum in the first 24 hours, the window closes. So after that, the gut won't absorb all these lovely antibodies. After that, they're just kind of expensive protein. So mom only has this colostrum for about 3 days. It's real syrupy milk. And the animals who get this now are proof against the germs in their world. So it turns out you can extract and purify transfer factors. And they, being these tiny, tiny molecules, still get through the gut and can treat even adult animals. So I've used those a lot to help boost the immune system. And while I think colostrum is great for the youngsters, it really doesn't do a whole lot of good for the adults. They're just not absorbing it well. So that's another thing. And probably just between diet and some supplements that are aimed at the immune system, another ingredient that we use a lot in my practice is medicinal mushrooms. And when you put these two together...
Right. We just had a question come on that. So this is perfect timing because someone was asking, can I use those mushrooms for my dogs? It was a question I saw come through. So, yeah.
Yeah. We've actually put a supplement together that combines these two. We call it Canine Immune Complete. And it's far and away the most effective way to do it is to add these ingredients together in dosages that you know work. If you're a mushroom expert and you know how to dose these things, go for it. But we've done that work for you, and Canine Immune Complete is a great way to get both in one serving.
Fabulous. Love that. There was another question earlier around heartworm. Like, how do we treat heartworm in a natural way? Yeah. Could you speak to that?
Yeah. It's actually on my list of the top 3 things you can do better. That's the third one, which is get the poisons out of the picture. Right. So there's what we do is we give pesticides for innumerable pests that the pet comes up against. The commonest ones are fleas. You know, everybody who's got a dog or a cat, I'm sure you know, deals with fleas.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to heartworm, let's talk about that because that's the commoner one. What do we do against them? Well, if you go to the conventional vet, you're given these little tubes that you squirt on the back of their shoulders, right?
Yes.
Frontline and Advantage and those sorts of things. And yet, if you read the fine print, John, you'll see this warning. It says, don't get this on your skin. If you get it on your hands, go wash your hands.
Really?
Yes. If you get it on your clothing,
what type of sanity is that? That's insanity.
Exactly. But we're supposed to believe it's just fine on the dog, right? So just put it on and go back to your life.
Somehow different. Interesting.
Right? Yeah.
And the skin, we absorb that. The skin's an absorption into the system, right? So
very absorptive. Yeah. What they sell it on is to try to tell you that it's probably not absorbed. It's this oil soluble thing that just goes down the coat and that sort of thing. But I can't buy putting pesticides on an animal. I mean, that just never has set well with me.
No.
So the other is collars. You know, we'll put collars on these animals that are pesticide laden. And the animal, of course, is breathing the pesticide and getting it absorbed through the skin of the neck. The winner, hands down, is this chew treat. And the one that catches my attention is called Bravecto. Bravecto is a chew treat that you give your dog that starts killing fleas within 2 hours of ingestion.
Jeez.
2 hours. And it lasts for 12 weeks, one dose. 12 weeks of flea-killing pesticides in your dog with one treat. Yeah. Well, what's wrong with this picture, right? I mean, how is that getting out to the surface? Your dog swallows it. How is that poison getting out to the surface? It's through the blood and through the bodily tissues and through the fluids in the body. The flea takes a drink of blood and dies from being poisoned. So, hello, I don't want my dog's bloodstream to be the vehicle for your pesticide. So heartworm pills are a similar thing. And the common class of all these pesticides that we use, whether it's for heartworm or for fleas or for ticks, is they all paralyze the victim. So they make the flea paralyzed, or in this case of heartworm, they make the little larvae in the bloodstream of your dog that may or may not be there. They paralyze it so it can't breathe and it can't digest and it just dies of paralysis. So let's call them what they are. They're often sold as heartworm medicines, but really what they are is neurotoxins. So obviously, the question arises, are we making our dogs more healthy by giving them a neurotoxin every month? Hello? Who's home, you know?
Yeah. But this is the thinking. This is the thinking world that we're also seeing in the world at the moment with this magical vaccine that's going to save the day. And you got people like Billy Boy, you know, just drinks nothing but Coca-Cola. There seems to be no logic in nutrition and cleansing in these fundamentals, which to me is insanity. And yet we're going to have this magical thing inject us and save the day. Yeah. This is insanity. And so hearing you from the animal kingdom perspective, having that alternative message fits so well with the theme of this summit, this sovereignty of health, including the animal kingdom. So fantastic to bring more dimensions of knowledge so that we can have that certainty in our beings to do what we know is right and true. Toxicity, I've gone through that as a human mammal, with toxicity in my body and having to detox, and I've done water fasts and cleansings to help my body when I've gone through some health issues. And it's incredible what comes out of you. It's incredible how sensitive you become afterwards. When you eat things, you're like, oh my God, I can taste like all these chemicals and things that I couldn't before. But before I was numb to it. Tell us about this conversation, this aspect in the animal world. How do toxins affect them? I know you've already been touching on that, but what can we do to help clean those toxins out of them, support them in that process?
This is a thing that's been very uppermost in my mind lately, John. I just wrote in my Vital Animal newsletter to my readers about a National Geographic study that had just come out. And it turns out there's huge parallels between people who have animals and their animals sharing the same toxins. So what they did for this study was just 5 days long. They put a silicone collar tag hanging from the dog's collar, and they put a silicone wristband on the humans with the dog. Right. And they found these parallels between things like pesticides. Glyphosate now we know is everywhere in the world, right? That's the Monsanto abomination. These things called phthalates, which are in perfumes and plastics to make them softer. They were parallel in both human and dog. They found PCBs that have been, at least in the US, banned since 1979 in 87% of the humans they tested and 97% of the dogs. So the dogs had even more of it. In cat research, they found these flame retardants that are often put into fabrics like couches and whatnot. Close association with feline hyperthyroidism, where these cats are now spinning out in their metabolism, and they're skinny and they're hot and their thyroid is just like on overdrive. Unheard of when I was in vet school just 40 years ago. So flame retardants. They looked at horses. Sick foals in Pennsylvania showed the same chemicals that were associated with fracking, this process of injecting chemicals to get out natural gas from deep in the earth. They found them in these foals. So there's all these parallels. Bizarre. And one of the things that opened my eyes when I started down the holistic path years and years ago was dogs who live in homes, who put herbicides on the lawn, have an exponential bladder cancer risk elevation. Right. So, we have to rethink all of this stuff and say, our pets are right close to the ground, right? And they're walking around barefoot. We've at least got shoes on, and they're smelling everything, right? That's how they interact with their world. So they're breathing in these things, and if the food has toxins in it, which unless we're careful, it does, the carpet's outgassing these volatile organic compounds. Bedding that's made out of polyurethane foam is outgassing. So we have to be aware of all these things. And the most obvious, of course, is the flea and the tick and the heartworm products. We have to do something safe and natural. And I'll tell you, I've got what's a library of helpful tips on vitalanimal.com. That's where I live online, vitalanimal.com. And you can find a search box there. And if you drop in heartworm or you drop in flea, you'll bring up a scad of articles that I've written that'll help you find alternatives to the common chemical ways that we do things.
But how can we detox them? So I've seen a question come in around the dogs. Like there was a question, how can I help my dog detox? So we know that's happened. We know our beloved little ones, dear ones have been toxified. Right. Is there a way in which we could somehow help them as we, of course, get them organic food and fresh raw meats and things like that? Is there a way that we can support them even further? Is that possible?
Yeah, definitely. We've only been working on this recently. I joined with Dr. Scott Treadway, who was a formulator for Tim James, who was on with you earlier. And we've put out a supplement that's based on not only his Ayurvedic herbs, and he's as brilliant with Ayurveda as I am with homeopathy. He knows these herbs. He knows how to combine them. But he's also put in this thing called purified zeolite, very, very clean zeolite. And it turns out these things help pull the toxins from the body.
Right.
And so in addition to feeding pure and maybe fasting a day a week, I think every dog benefits from a fast a day a week. We can give supplements that help pull these things out.
Yes. Fantastic. I know from a human perspective, when I was doing my detoxing, I was using bentonite clay, and I think it was called diatomaceous earth or something, and it was helping pull it out of the system, plus a lot of water. So fantastic to know that the same is available for the animal kingdom to support them in this process. Absolutely love that. And just want to tune back in. Thank you so much for all these comments. There was a question just asking again, what was the website again? So there's a question from Fawny. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Apologies. So what was the website again?
Yeah, there are two. There's vitalanimal.com. That's where all the information lies.
Got it.
And the sister website is up on the bio, I think, for me. It's called Vital Pet Health. And that's where you can get these things like Canine Immune Complete. That's our product area.
Beautiful. Someone just posted it.
Detox. Good.
Fabulous. Beautiful. Good to know that we can take action steps, practical steps to help our animals detox. Next question I want to go to, this is one that I had myself, and I was pondering on this, is raw foods. Like, how do we go about that? Because, from what I've learned from you just recently, just giving some raw meat isn't a balanced raw food. So how do we make it balanced?
Yeah. So it's a great question, John. And I want everybody to know that a bowl of raw hamburger is a very unbalanced meal, right? It's a better start. Once in a while you could do that and get away with it, but you wouldn't want to do that for long term. So again, I go back to the ancestor and the close cousin, who's the wolf. We've got a 99% genetic overlap between wolf and dog. And we go, what's prey look like? How close can we mock up prey in our food dish at home? Well, prey is a whole animal, right? It's not only the muscles. They don't just eat the muscles and run off to the next prey animal. That's the meat. It's also bone, and it's also organs, and it's a little bit of digestive contents that are macerated and digested. But the wolves who've been studied in the wild, they shake out that digestive content on the ground and they go for the organs first and the meat and the bone. So we can make a fairly good balance if we think in those terms. Okay. And I paint with broad brushstrokes as opposed to getting, down to the fine wires. But there are people who've got books out there that will tell you how to make a balanced raw diet. I think Karen Becker has one and several other people do. So there's two ways really ultimately to do it. You can make your own and you follow some guidelines. You get a book or you get an expert that's helping you to get it balanced. That's more labor intensive, but in the end it's cheaper. And the opposite way is to buy it ready-made. And there's a handful of really good makers of raw food now who will ship it to you solidly frozen, at least in the West. Probably not in Bali yet, and definitely not in India yet. So they'll ship it to you and it's ready-made, and you can trust that they've put in their homework and they've made it balanced. So that is less work. All you have to do is thaw it and feed it, but it's more expensive. So it's this where do you want to land? Right. But balance is real important. And the thing about balance is it doesn't have to be to the micrometer or the microgram in every single meal. So a wolf doesn't eat a balanced meal every single meal. Today they're eating voles because that's the thing that's around. And next month, the caribou come and they're starting to bring down caribou. So it changes radically, but over time, they're balanced. That's an important point.
Got it. And I love how you bring it back to the fundamentals of nature and what's working and what has worked for thousands of years. Heaven forbid we tap into what's worked for thousands of years. Goodness. So I love the thinking.
We tend to be put off by these food labels. If you start out with science diet, for instance, and you read the ingredient label, it's like 40 ingredients long. And you go, how could I ever make that? I couldn't possibly. But again, you go back to the wild model and you say, who's genetically like my dog? The wolf is. Yeah. So how does a wolf eat? Does a wolf eat all these things that I can't even pronounce? Never. Doesn't come across him.
Yeah. And I'm loving comments. I'm just seeing so many comments coming through. Thank you for all this information. This is awesome from Tracy. We've got the Mighty Wolf. Love them guys. And then this one, even meat has chemicals. Sad face. So that's where it's a question of getting the raw or the organic, high quality meats.
Yeah.
Is there ways like I'm not sure if this is a practical for meats, so just throwing this out there may be unuseful or maybe not. But I know we can wash vegetables with apple cider vinegar and things like that just to get the coating of chemicals off. Is there anything that can be done like that for the meats, or is it absorbed already into the meats?
Unless you're careful about sourcing, it's there. So the animal raisers that I like to support are those who are either helping to scavenge the hunting remains. When hunters bring in an elk or a deer, there's a lot left over that they don't take home. And I've got a company on my vitalanimal.com that uses that source, raw and wild game, to make their dog food with. Super source, very affordable, very good, very high quality. And the other is if you've got a local raiser of, say, cattle or sheep or goats near you, who is pasture raising them for their whole life, not just pasture finishing, they call it, but raising them that way for their whole life, you can count on them not feeding GMO grains, feeding as nature would intend. And those animals are the ideal ones if you're going to make it yourself.
Got it. Thank you for that. We have just had a question come in from Jacqueline saying, what can we use holistically for flea control?
There's a great page on my site, Jacqueline, about non-toxic flea control. If you just look up the word flea on vitalanimal.com, you'll pull it up. It's probably my most visited one. And there are things you can do in the environment, not killing the adult flea, which is about 5% of the whole population pyramid, addressing the environment in your house primarily. So flea eggs cannot hatch and cannot develop up to the adult stage. There's things you can put in the carpet like borate salts, or even maybe 20 mule team borax if you're pinched for money. It's just not a very fine powder, but a fine powder in the carpet. And you can use these things called IGRs, which are insect growth regulators. They're safe for mammals, relatively low on the toxicity scale for mammals, but they stop the molting of the flea, the hatching of the egg, and the molting of the larvae to prevent them from getting to adulthood. Those are two things that I talk about in that non-toxic flea control page. So head over there and you'll get some good ideas. We can do it.
And for those thinking this is a little bit of extra work and got to source the right meats and whatnot, understandable. But for me, what's coming through as I'm listening to you more and more, Will, is it how much this matters, because it makes sense with humans as well. And we're like, okay, this is happening in the animal kingdom as well. And as we see how important this is, then we're more willing to take the actions necessary because we're better educated to put that extra time and energy in to take care of these dear animals that are looking to us and trusting us with their lives. And so that's what's coming through for me. And
the balance, let me just interject that the balance is, if you do these things in the conventional way and you buy everything that your conventional vet tells you to do, the flea poisons, the lifeless kibble, the vaccines regularly, what you'll end up with is an animal with chronic disease. Chronic just means it's stretched out over years and probably the rest of their life. Well, it turns out that clients who would come to me as a homeopathic vet, sometimes the first words off their lips were, I have spent thousands of dollars already, and my animal is still an itchy mess. Or my animal still wants to chew her feet off. They're bloody because she's so itchy and she's so allergic to stuff. So when you frame those thousands of dollars that were already spent without success against the cost of feeding well and, doing some things a little more effort, you roll your sleeves up and you get in and you do the things that count.
That makes sense. I'm so glad you spoke to that. I hadn't thought of that in this, but of course that makes sense. It's certainly the case with humans as well. So of course it's going to apply to animals as well. So putting more of that energy, more of that care, that attention up front. Exactly. Yeah, and there may be more cost to that, but ultimately you're going to save over time because vet bills are not cheap. Yeah. And taking care of sick animals, it costs a lot, and there's suffering from it. So I totally get that the value is there for putting the effort into this on so many levels. So that makes a lot of sense. There was a question from Tracy, another question from Tracy that was around grain-free kibble. Yes or no? Do we use it? Do we not?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tracy. And I think that the jury is still out. It's a kibble. So it's still very unlike anything that a wolf would eat. And that's who your dog is, whether your dog is a little bitty poodle or a Chihuahua up to a Great Dane. Genetically speaking, they're saying, where's the prey? That's what I know is food. That's what all my ancestors ate. So these chunks are still processed chunks and they're landing in the bowl. And grain-free usually does not mean starch-free. So when we eat starches, when a carnivore like a dog eats starches, all sorts of problems can ensue. That's why we're seeing obesity in cats. They're eating these kibbles because it's convenient, and the cats are all addicted to them. They love them. Okay. Nothing like a raw diet at all. And these cats are getting diabetes. They're getting obesity. Wow. We see the same thing in the dogs. When I was going through vet school, John, there were 2 dogs in the clinic in my last 2 years of vet school who had diabetes, and they were like brother and sister. They were beagles. And those were the only dogs I saw with diabetes for the next 10 years of practice. And now that's become very, very common. It's growing like it is in the humans. So starch makes sugar, pushes the sugar balance all around, that sort of thing. Doesn't happen with a raw diet. So I'm cautious about grain-free. I don't think it's a great answer yet.
Got it. Thanks for that. And Anna's asking this one, essential oils and how humans use them, does that impact our animals? Which is safe, which are unsafe? Are you able to speak to that? Is something you're aware of?
Yeah, I know people in my field that are experts in them. If you search on vets and essential oils, you'll pull them up online. And I think they can be used, but you have to know what you're doing. And the one caution I put to people who would like to tie a collar around their dog with essential oils to keep fleas away, that's been an approach some people have taken, is that think for a moment of your dog's smell sense. They are something like 10 or 100,000 times more sensitive to smells than we are. They've got that many more receptors in their nasal passages. That's why when they're breathing, they're often taking things in and out several times because they're sensing all that. They need to get a chance to escape from any kind of a strong odor, like an essential oil. So I don't recommend using them for flea control if the dog can't get out from them. So find somebody who's more knowledgeable than I. It's not been an area that I've worked on a lot, but they can be used and can be used effectively.
Got it. Thank you. Cindy was just asking about fruits and vegetables. Is that something we can give them? Is it good? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, in a small amount, they're fine. So there are people. Food is our biggest attachment. Whether we're taking it in or we're feeding it to our animals, we want to do it right. So there are people who are hard nosed and will say, "Oh, absolutely no fruit and vegetables because wolves don't eat that stuff." Well, they do, but a small amount. They'll eat the blueberries off the bush. They'll eat vegetation when prey isn't available. So people that want to add it, it's got to be very finely macerated or chopped or blended. Right. And it shouldn't be more than about 5 or 10% of the whole of what you're offering. Should be a small percentage. That would mimic what's happening in the wild ancestors.
Got it. So no well-meaning vegans just giving pure plants only. That ain't going to work.
Not going to work.
As beautiful as that intention is and that I honor, but it's not going to happen, huh?
Yeah, I think the honoring is really who these animals are, John. So they don't have teeth like they do with fangs that can rip flesh, and the molars in the back, not made for grinding like ours are, but made for cutting flesh. They're not made that way to be pushed into a vegan diet. It's just not a sensible thing to do for them. They're made to be fed like their ancestors are fed. And can they digest starch now? Yes, they can. Is it the best thing for them? No.
Okay, got it. Question I have is, just like in the physical world, there's a lot of concern right now, and that's why so many people are coming to this World Health Sovereignty Summit. They're here, they're tuning in, because one of the major concerns is this mandatory forced vaccination. And if you don't have it, well, you're not going to be able to travel, you're not going to be able to work, you're not able to compete in sport if you're a professional athlete, and there's an uprising around this. This is stirring up a lot of people. We don't want something foreign inside us, particularly when we learn about what the heck is in it, which is highly, highly questionable. But the same dilemma, the same question, problem, challenge is in the animal kingdom as well. If I don't get my dog jabbed, for example, can I get him groomed? Can I put him in a kennel? Could you speak to that,
Sure.
if you could?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I get a lot. So the first thing to know is that there is only one vaccine among the 7 or 8 choices that you might be pushed on that is demanded and mandatory by law, and that is rabies. Rabies, back to the zoonosis that we talked about, it's a disease from animals to man. So that is the only one that has any laws about it, and those laws are mostly in the West, in the US and Canada. That said, you have a choice, and people who've taken my Rabies Knowledge is Power course, for instance, I coach them on this. One of the biggest aids that you'll have to getting your needs met, if you're saying, I'm going to drop out of this, my dog's already been vaccinated for rabies, I know that longevity of the duration of immunity is probably lifelong, many, many years if not, that I'm going to drop out and not keep doing it. How do I get my needs met? One of the biggest aces in the hole is to have what I call a sympathetic vet on your side. It's someone who knows your intention, who understands duration of immunity. These are usually holistic vets or homeopathic vets who can write you a letter. I've done this for my clients over the years and say, oh, you're going to a boarding place. I'll write a letter and say, this is my patient. I'm treating Sadie for allergies. She's already had a history of vaccines. Therefore, she should be no risk to anybody that she mingles with in the boarding facility. And I sign it with my DVM, and I give a little reference to a book that says immunity to viruses lasts a long time. And inevitably, these places that would have such control over your animal's welfare do not understand immunology, but if they've got a letter from a vet on file, they're good to go.
Right.
So that's one thing.
Right. Got it.
Another is if you got a groomer who's demanding of you current vaccines. The first thing is you can say, yep, she's current if you vaccinated any time in the past because of this thing called duration of immunity. So current is true.
Immunity. Okay.
They're immune for a long time. The other is you can get a groomer who's mobile and will come to your house and groom your dog for you. They shouldn't ask any questions about, are you up to date on shots or not? Because they're in your environment, for goodness sake. You're hiring them to do work for you. You're not risking anybody in their confines.
Yeah, it's not like they're going to get infected.
No. And you'll see all sorts of crazy stuff in vet clinics. The conventional vets will say, well, if you're not up to date on rabies vaccine, my staff is at risk. Well, wait a minute. Are you saying if I go over a year or over 3 years, my dog is now rabid?
Madness.
She sure doesn't look rabid. She looks really healthy to me.
Well, I don't know how we survived for these thousands of years without all these vaccinations and all these strange, bizarre practices, which are so, so mandatory. It just doesn't make sense to me how we made it this far.
Exactly.
Being a bit sarcastic there. As we start to wrap up this conversation, I want to open this up to you to go. Is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation for the listeners that you feel hasn't yet been spoken to that is vitally important for those watching this?
Well, I think in a nutshell, John, it's that you have to become empowered to make decisions for these animals that you love. They are the innocents in the world. They look to you to say, what am I going to eat today, Mom? Or we're going in the car. Where are we going to go? Are we going to go to the vet for more shots, or are we going to go out to the park and have a romp in the sun? So empowerment comes with knowledge. And that's my whole goal now, that I've become more focused on teaching than, fixing one broken animal at a time in my practice. There's a lot to learn. It's not rocket science by any means. It's common sense, like you and I've just talked about.
Yeah.
And you can go to places like vitalanimal.com and you can search out holistic vets. There's a handful of sites out there. There aren't many that are as thorough as mine, but learn these things. And use your common sense. Would you go in for a shot every year? Obviously not.
No way.
Why would you even consider that? And no doctor is telling you to do that. Watch out for the COVID one. I'm not buying that at all. If they try to tell you, the immunity doesn't last very long, you got to come in every year. Run the other way. That's a big red light. So it comes down to learning these principles that are simple, common sense principles: how to feed, how to avoid poisons, and how to get around the vaccine rules that are oftentimes not rules. Your animal is not really due in a year for another round of shots. And the people that shine forth in this have animals that I call the vital animal ambassadors. They are these guys who end up in the dog park, and they're like magnets, John. They're so shiny, and they're so well balanced in their behavior, and their breath smells sweet, and their eyes are clear and glowing. They draw people to them. And conversations start. They're digging their fingers in this coat because it's so luxurious and soft. And they go, how did you get her there? And so conversations start and ripples spread. And I love the people who've got this, whether they've gotten it from me or gotten it from someone else. They now own their animals' health decisions. And so conversations start in the dog park, and they say, well, I feed raw food. Raw food. Isn't that dangerous? And they go, no, here's why. And I stopped vaccinating years ago. How do you do that? Conversations start, and minds are opened, and so it goes.
Love it. What I'm hearing there is heal thyself, empowerment. I have a friend of mine, Tyler Tolman, helps people learn these types of things for humans. And it's one of the things he says is, it's about taking that personal responsibility, healing yourself, the basics, sunshine, fresh water, getting back to these fundamentals. So it's a lifestyle shift of consciousness, if you like, or thinking, or however you want to, speak to it, which parallels with our walk as a human and an animal. There's a symbiotic relationship there, is what I'm at least seeing. So I absolutely love that. I adore your message. I thank you. I haven't had the opportunity to meet someone like you until just recently and learn. So I am making the connections of my own journey and for my animals. And I got a lot of things to apply from what you've just taught me. And I'm super grateful. I'm grateful for everyone that's been interacting, for your questions or your comments or your love. I thank you. And this is part, for those of you who aren't yet aware, this is part of our World Health Sovereignty Summit. So Will's our guest here, giving us this knowledge of the animal kingdom. And we're also addressing the human challenges, the human battle, the bigger picture as well in that context, where we have the main compilation event coming this Saturday, where if you haven't yet registered for that event, you can go to www.reclaimyourlives.com. So we can't wait to see you there. Will, thank you for you. I am so excited that you're doing more teaching and getting your message out to the world. And I look forward in any way at all supporting you in that, because I think it's absolutely vital. Thank you for you.
My pleasure, John. I'm so glad to be here. And I put together a really nice ebook for those who want to go a little deeper.
Yes. Fabulous. Thank you.
Very simple URL to remember. And this is all about natural immunization. And while the title is Puppy Immunization Without Vaccination, it really applies to broader ages and even species. So the way to get this free ebook that goes into immune confusion and natural immunity is just vitalanimal.com/summit. vitalanimal.com/summit. And you'll find this ebook ready and waiting for you to learn more of this and to take it to heart.
Awesome. Well, thank you for putting that together for the community. Thank you, Laura, to send your message. You're so welcome. A privilege to be with you. Greg, thank you so much. Philip is saying, thank you, Dr. Will. So we are just grateful to have you all with us. This is where the message continues. It's through you. It's through your transformations. It's through those conversations, as Will had just mentioned, in the parks. And let's make this happen, this change that we know needs to happen. Thank you so much, Will. Appreciate you.
Glad to be here, John. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye, everybody.
Wow.